The first time my dad called me by my dead brother's name, I swear something inside me cracked. My name is Caleb Foster. I was 17 when the crash happened. My twin brother, Ethan, was in the seat beside me, laughing at some dumb TikTok, when the Uber driver drifted across the yellow lines. The impact was so loud it still rattles in my skull at night. Ethan and the driver died instantly. I lived, but living didn't feel like survival. I woke up in a Wilmington, Delaware hospital with my legs half dead, brain foggy, and parents who wouldn't even look at me like their son. They looked at me like a murderer. I spent 4 days hooked to machines, staring at ceiling tiles, waiting for them to sit with me, to tell me they loved me, to tell me we'd get through this together. They only came once. Not to comfort me. Not to cry with me. They came to tell me that Ethan's death was my fault. You called the Uber, my mom whispered like it was a curse. You could have cancelled when you saw the driver was late, my dad added, like I'd signed Ethan's death warrant myself. The weight of those words sank in so deep I couldn't breathe. By the 7th day, the nurse was discharging me. My wheelchair felt like a prison, my hospital gown still smelled of disinfectant, and for the first time in a week, my parents walked in smiling. Not grieving, not angry, smiling. We're a family again, my mom said, voice sweet as poison. A happy family. I didn't understand. Not until they wheeled me through our front door, straight past my room, and into Ethan's. His old clothes laid out crisp on the bed. His posters still on the walls. My mom fussing with the curtains like she was setting up a stage. This is your new beginning, she cooed. I froze. My mouth went dry. Behind me, I heard the hum of clippers. I turned just in time to see my dad step forward, his hand gripping my chin so tight it hurt. Stay still, Ethan. The buzz of the clippers carved through the air as he cut my hair into Ethan's old middle part. I sobbed so hard my chest burned, but they didn't stop. They just kept calling me his name. 2 weeks later, I wasn't Caleb anymore. I was Ethan. My toothbrush had his initials on it. The family photos on the wall, ones I remembered posing for, were edited. My face gone. Only Ethan smiling back. Every night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how long until they forgot Caleb Foster ever existed. And then came the dinner with Amy. Amy was Ethan's girlfriend. 3 years together, the kind of high school sweethearts who already had plans to get married after graduation. My parents invited her over like it was a normal night. I thought maybe, finally, they wanted to face the grief. But when Amy walked in and saw me dressed in Ethan's hoodie, hair styled like his, my parents beaming proudly as they said, "Look who's here, sweetheart," the way her face twisted will haunt me forever. She looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. I wanted to tell her the truth right there at the table, but my dad's voice cut me like a knife. Theo, go sit beside your girlfriend. Don't be rude. I wanted to scream. My mom just smiled and said, "Whatever you say, Ethan. Get Amy some water, please." Amy excused herself to the bathroom, but we both knew she wasn't coming back. Seconds later, I heard the slam of the front door. I thought her horror would wake my parents up, snap them out of the delusion. But it only made them worse. The next morning, my dad dragged me out of my wheelchair and threw me on the floor. My knee screamed in pain as he stood over me. "If you weren't in that chair, Amy would have stayed," he barked. Ethan doesn't limp. Ethan doesn't need pills. When my mom found the bottle of painkillers I'd been hiding, she flushed them down the toilet with a smile. "My Ethan isn't an addict," she said. I begged. I cried. I told them I was grieving, too. But they left me there on the cold hardwood. 10 minutes later, my mom's voice floated up the stairs like nothing had happened. "Ethan, honey, breakfast is ready." That's when something inside me broke. I gave up. For months, I wore Ethan's clothes, answered to his name, forced myself to draw like he used to laugh like he used to be someone I wasn't. Every time I looked in the mirror, Caleb faded more and more. But I wasn't gone yet. Because one night, my phone buzzed. A message from Amy. "Are you okay?" I can't stop thinking about that dinner. Something's not right. And that's when the ghost inside me finally stirred. But that wasn't the worst of it, not even close. The night Amy's message lit up my phone, it felt like my chest cracked open. For the first time in months, someone saw me, and not Ethan, not some ghost of a twin, but me. Caleb. I stared at her words for so long my hands shook. My fingers barely worked anymore, clumsy from the nerve damage, but I managed to type back. "I'm not Ethan. I'm Caleb. Please believe me." There was a long pause, those 3 little dots bouncing across the screen. Then her reply. "Where can we meet?" 2 nights later, I dragged myself to the park. Every step with my cane felt like my bones were on fire, but I didn't care. When I saw Amy under the streetlight, arms crossed, face pale, I nearly collapsed from relief. She didn't flinch, didn't run, she just stared at me like she was seeing a stranger and an old friend at the same time. For hours, we sat on a cold bench talking about Ethan, about grief, about how broken everything felt. And for the first time since the crash, I laughed. It was shaky, uneven, but it was mine. "You're Caleb," she whispered finally. "Not Ethan." I knew it. "They're sick." Her words lit something in me I thought was dead. She begged me to start reclaiming myself, play guitar again, the thing I loved most before the accident. I hadn't touched mine since the crash. My fingers didn't work right, my brain felt scrambled, but the next day, I crawled to the basement and found my old guitar under a tarp. My hands fumbled so badly I could barely strum, but when a single, sour chord rang out, I felt alive again. For weeks, Amy became my secret tether to reality. My parents thought they were winning, that their Theo was finally settling in. But late at night, Amy and I would message about plans, about finding ways for me to be me again. Then came the 6-month anniversary of Ethan's death. My parents left for the courthouse to inquire about legal name changes, words that made my stomach twist. Amy came over while they were gone, and we sat in the living room, guitars in our laps, playing clumsy duets, crying for the real Ethan. But of course, nothing good lasted. The front door opened too soon. My parents stood there, wide-eyed. My mom gasped like she'd just witnessed a miracle. "You're back together," she squealed. Our Ethan and Amy, reunited. My dad's eyes narrowed. "Since when do you play guitar, Ethan?" And something in me snapped. "I'm not Ethan!" I screamed. My voice was raw, sharp enough to silence the room. "I'm Caleb. I'm your son, Caleb." The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the explosion. My parents lunged at Amy, accusing her of seducing me, of poisoning my mind, of trying to destroy their family. They dragged her out by the arm, ignoring her sobs. They shoved me up the stairs, demanding I go to Ethan's room. But I didn't. I slammed my own door and locked it. For hours, my dad banged on the wood, yelling, "Get into Ethan's room where you belong." But I stayed put, trembling, clutching my guitar like a shield. That night, things shifted from delusion to horror. Around midnight, they broke the lock. I woke to hands ripping my phone away, to their voices blending in a storm of anger. My dad scrolled through my texts with Amy. I heard her number being deleted, my contacts erased, every connection to her gone in seconds. Then came the sound that truly broke me, glass shattering in the backyard. My guitar, my lifeline, smashed into splinters. "You're not Caleb," my mom hissed. "You never were." They left me there, shaking on the floor, my world collapsing. But the worst was still coming. The next morning, I woke to flashing lights outside the window. An ambulance. My heart seized as I hurried downstairs, cane slipping in my hands. There on the stretcher, pale and lifeless, was my mother. She'd tried to take her own life. As the EMTs loaded her into the ambulance, my dad grabbed my shoulders with wet eyes and whispered, "Tell her you're sorry for what you did." Tell her you're Ethan. And for the first time in my life, I saw pure hatred in my mother's eyes, hatred directed at me, her surviving son. The ventilator beeped faster. She was crashing. And I realized then, if they erased Caleb, if I let them, I wouldn't just lose myself. I'd lose my life. But that wasn't the worst of it, no, the worst was just beginning. The sight of my mother's eyes that day, cold, filled with something closer to hate than pain, burned itself into me. It followed me even back in the hospital waiting room, where my dad paced like a madman, switching between calling me Caleb and Ethan in the same breath. It was like he didn't even know who I was anymore. Or maybe he just didn't care. I sat in that plastic chair, hands shaking, legs screaming from being forced out of the wheelchair. My mind drifted back to a memory I hadn't touched in months. I was 9. Ethan and I had just finished a little league game. We lost, but I didn't care because Ethan had hit a home run, and that meant he'd let me wear his team cap on the way home. He shoved it on my head, laughing, ruffling my hair. "Now you look like me," he teased. Back then, it was just a joke. Just twin stuff. Nobody thought it mattered who was who. Now that joke was my prison. When my dad shoved his phone in my face that day, showing me Amy's texts, I know what happened. On my way. I almost broke down right there. My one tether, about to walk straight into the storm. And she did. 20 minutes later, Amy burst through the ER doors, eyes red, voice cracking as she shouted for me. But my dad was faster. He blocked her path, arms spread wide like some guardian. "You need to leave," he growled. "His name is Caleb," she fired back. "He told me everything. You've been." He grabbed her arm so hard she winced. Security rushed over, and suddenly we were in a tiny office, white walls closing in. Dad spun his story like he'd rehearsed it for years. "This girl is obsessed with our dead son, Ethan. She's stalking my surviving boy, confusing him, making him believe he's someone else." I tried to speak, to say my name. But the words tangled in my throat, the medication fogging my brain until only fragments came out. "Not Ethan, me? Caleb?" The security guard looked at me with pity. Then at the purple bruises blooming on my wrist. "How'd he get those?" the guard asked. "He falls," my dad said smoothly. "We try to help, but sometimes we grab too hard." Amy's voice cracked. "Those are fingerprints. Caleb, show them your other arm." Dad's grip clamped down on my shoulder so hard I gasped. "Theo gets confused," he said. "It's survivor's guilt. Dr. Catherine can explain." Even the supervisor bought it. They told Amy she had to leave or risk being arrested for harassment. She fought, tears streaming, but they escorted her out. Her last words before the door slammed shut: "Caleb, I'm not giving up on you." And then she was gone. My dad guided me back to the waiting room, fingers digging into my arm, whispering in my ear. "She's poison. You're not Caleb. You never were." That night, when they finally let me see my mother, her body wired with tubes, machines breathing for her, I leaned close, whispering, "Mom, it's me. It's Caleb." Her eyes opened. For a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd see me. But her fingers twitched, clawing weakly at the air like she was trying to push me away. The monitors beeped widely, alarms blaring. A nurse rushed in. "I think you should go," she said quickly. I stumbled back, cane slipping, and when I looked through the ICU window, I caught a reflection of myself. Hairstyled like Ethan's. His hoodie. His watch. And for one terrifying second, I didn't recognize my own face. Back home, things only got worse. My dad had removed the lock from my door, stripped my closet of the last of Caleb's clothes, and replaced them with Ethan's trophies and medals. My childhood had been deleted, overwritten. That night, as I lay in Ethan's navy blue sheets, the walls closing in, I heard my dad's voice outside the door, low and urgent on the phone. Yes, the papers are ready. I understand the risks. Tomorrow afternoon, evaluation and possible admission. Admission. The word clanged around in my skull. Psychiatric. Institutional. If he succeeded, Caleb Foster would vanish forever. I pressed my ear to the floor, my heart racing. My dad's footsteps creaked up the stairs, heavy and deliberate. I scrambled into bed, faking sleep, as he opened the door and set a bottle of pills on my nightstand. Maybe these will help you think more clearly, Ethan, he murmured. The implication was clear, take them, or he'd find another way. And I realized something I'd been too afraid to admit before. This wasn't grief. This wasn't denial. This was a war. And I was losing. The next morning, my dad was already dressed, bags packed, papers tucked neatly under his arm. He laid out Ethan's prom suit for me like it was my uniform. Today's the day, Ethan. Big step forward. Be grateful. I swallowed the pills he handed me because he forced me to open my mouth and lift my tongue after. But something was different. They didn't hit me the same way. My head wasn't swimming. My eyes didn't blur. That's when I saw her, Mrs. Chen from next door, watering her flowers across the yard, watching me through narrowed eyes. When my dad turned away, she gave me the tiniest nod. My stomach flipped. Come on, Dad snapped. We're late. The drive was 2 hours. He filled the silence with rehearsed memories, reciting Ethan's childhood stories as if saying them enough times could make them true. I stared out the window, pressing my fingernails into my palms just to feel something real. At the hospital, he guided me through a maze of white halls until we reached a locked unit with frosted windows. The psychiatric ward. Dr. Catherine was waiting. She smiled gently, clipboard in hand. Ethan, we're going to help you today. No more confusion. I tried to say my name, Caleb, but the words came out broken, tangled by months of drugs. Dad leaned in, his voice dripping with triumph. You hear that? He's still confused. They talked over me like I wasn't even there. Inpatient program. Identity disorder. Long-term care. The words swirled like knives in my head. If I went behind those locked doors, I wasn't coming out. Back in the car, Dad was humming. Humming. Like this was the happiest day of his life. He didn't see the sweat on my temples, didn't feel my pulse racing. When we pulled into the driveway, the world exploded. Amy's car screeched around the corner. Mrs. Chen walked out with 2 neighbors flanking her. And then a van I didn't recognize blocked the driveway. What the hell is this? Dad hissed, tightening his grip on my arm. A woman stepped out of the van, clipboard in hand. Mr. Foster, my name is Victoria Peters. Adult Protective Services. We need to speak with your son, Caleb. His name is Ethan, my dad barked, yanking me closer. You people don't understand. He's sick. Mrs. Chen's voice rang clear across the yard. I've been documenting everything. The pills. The locks. The bruises. And last night? I replaced his medication with vitamins. My dad's face drained of color. Amy ran forward, her voice sharp and trembling. Tell them your name. Say it. My dad's hand clamped over my mouth, his nails biting into my skin. I struggled, panic flaring. But for the first time in months, my head was clear enough to push back. I twisted free, lungs burning, and shouted so loud the neighbors gasped. My name is Caleb Foster. He's been forcing me to pretend I'm Ethan. My brother's dead, I'm not. The words ripped through the air like a gunshot. My dad shoved me so hard I collapsed on the driveway. Amy sprinted to my side, her hand shaking as she pulled me up. You don't understand. Dad screamed, his voice cracking into madness. Ethan deserved to live. Caleb killed him. Caleb should have died. The neighbors' phones were out, recording every second. The APS worker was already on her radio, calling police backup. Dad's face twisted into something unrecognizable, hatred, grief, desperation all colliding. He turned and bolted toward the house, slamming the door behind him. Through the window, I saw him pacing, ripping papers, tearing at photo frames. Sirens wailed in the distance. Growing closer. For the first time since the crash, I realized I might actually survive this. But survival came with a price. Because my father wasn't done yet. Red and blue lights splashed across our house like it was a crime scene. Which, I guess, it was. Cops swarmed the yard, neighbors filming from their porches, Amy gripping my arm so tight I thought she might break it. My dad was still inside, his shadow darting past windows as officers shouted through megaphones for him to come out. I sat on the curb, head spinning, listening to everything unravel. He's got forged documents, Mrs. Chen told the APS worker. Name change papers. I've seen him practicing his son's signature through the window. He smashed Caleb's guitar, Amy added, voice shaking. He cut me off from him for months. The officers listened, nodding grimly. And then, my dad appeared at the upstairs window. My window. He'd ripped one of the decorative bars loose and was trying to squeeze out, screaming about how he was being persecuted, how Caleb didn't exist, how Ethan is the only son I have left. It would have been comical if it wasn't so horrifying, him half stuck, writhing in the window frame like a trapped animal. The officers dragged him down eventually, cuffed and red-faced, still ranting that I was Ethan. But when the squad car pulled away, something inside me loosened. The performance was over. No more pretending. In the days that followed, everything blurred. Paramedics checked me over, muttering about bruises, malnutrition, drug levels in my system. At the hospital, doctors shook their heads at the cocktail of medications my dad had forced on me. Antipsychotics, sedatives, mood stabilizers, poison disguised as treatment. And then Aunt Sarah flew in from Ohio. She hugged me so hard I thought I'd break. I knew something was wrong, she whispered. He always had an excuse, but I knew. Amy never left my side. She brought me my favorite snacks from before the accident, helped me relearn chords on a borrowed guitar, sat with me through the shakes and sweats of withdrawal. My mom woke up a few days later in the ICU. Aunt Sarah went in first, then came back crying, saying, "She called you Caleb. She knows." When I finally walked into that room with a cane in one hand and Amy in the other, my mom's eyes filled with tears. She reached for me, voice barely a whisper. "Caleb. My Caleb. I'm so sorry." I wanted to scream at her, tell her she let it happen, that she called me Ethan while smashing the last pieces of me. But the words tangled in my throat. All I could do was let her fragile hand rest in mine. The legal fight stretched on for months. Detectives uncovered journals my dad had kept, full of plans to erase Caleb Foster permanently. Bank records showed he'd already started transferring my accident settlement into accounts under Ethan's name. He wasn't just delusional, he was meticulous. Calculated. The prosecutor said it best, this wasn't grief. This was control. When the trial came, I sat in court, staring across the room at the man who raised me. His hair was thinner, his suit wrinkled, his eyes wild. When the judge asked for my name, I said it clear and steady. My name is Caleb Foster. His face twisted like I'd stabbed him. The jury found him guilty. Identity theft. Abuse. Fraud. He'll be gone for a long time. Maybe forever. Afterward, people asked me if I felt free. If I felt like myself again. And the truth is, not really. Not yet. My body still shakes when I hear his voice in dreams. I still catch myself flinching when someone calls me Ethan by accident. But there are moments. Small ones. Amy teaching me to play guitar again. Aunt Sarah painting my new bedroom green, my favorite color, not Ethan's. Mrs. Chen bringing soup and whispering, "I'm proud of you." I'm rebuilding piece by piece. My mom visits sometimes. We talk in halting words, broken apologies, tentative trust. I don't know if I'll ever forgive her, not fully. But she calls me Caleb. Every time. That matters. And every night, before I sleep, I stare at my guitar resting against the wall. Not his guitar. Mine. I survived. I'm real. But sometimes, when the house is too quiet and the shadows stretch too long, I still hear his voice, my father's voice, hissing in my ear. You'll always be Ethan.